Hello, everyone. I hope you are having an awesome day. Welcome to the Next Year Alliance GreenG Working Group's webinar on sustainability metrics, are data centers and core networks ready? My name is Gagandeep Singh Bhatti, and I am currently serving as the Vice Chair of the GreenG Working Group. Today, we'll be having very exciting and insightful panel discussion on the data center and core network sustainability metrics. Our discussion will be moderated by our amazing moderator, Carsten Baumann of Schneider Electric, with insights from our distinguished panelists, Colin Cant from Nokia, Michaela Guhat from Microsoft, she'll be joining very soon, Amanda Abel from Stream Data Centers, and Nancy Novak from Compass Data Centers. Thanks and welcome to all panelists. This slide shares a brief of our can we go to the next slide, please? This slide shares a brief overview of our GreenG working group of the Next G Alliance. Our motto is to minimize the environmental impact of the future generations of wireless technologies. The mission of the Next G Alliance GreenG working group is to position North America as the global leader in environmental sustainability by creating a sustainable 6G ecosystem and enabling other industries to reduce greenhouse gases and energy consumption, limit land and water use, and move towards circular economy. Our leadership team includes Working Group Chair Bhushan Joshi from Ericsson, Vice Chair Ralph Bendelin from AT&T, Principal Technologist Ian Deacon from ATIS, and myself as the Vice Chair. If we go over to the next slide, please. This slide outlines the timeline of our white paper publications. We're starting with path towards sustainable 6G in 2022. We then introduced the 6G sustainability KPI assessment, followed by the evolution of sustainability indicators for next-gen RAN technologies, where we examined the UE and RAN aspects. Our latest released white paper, which we are going to discuss today, is the evolution of sustainability indicators for the data center and next-gen core networks. I would also like to give a brief teaser of our upcoming white paper, The Promise and Challenges of AI in 6G, which is going to be released very soon. So please stay tuned. Up next, Carsten Baumann will provide a brief overview of our white paper on the evolution of sustainability indicators for the data center and next-gen core networks before leading to the panel discussion. After panel discussion, our working group chair, Bhushan Joshi, will share the key takeaways and call to action before closing. Thank you once again for tuning in, and now I hand over to Carsten. Over to you, Carsten.
Thank you, Gagandeep. I really appreciate it. It has been an amazing journey to work with the industry leaders, on developing and publishing this paper here. And I'm really excited to have this panel with some of the best experts, on this journey today here in the next 40 minutes or so. And before we get to the panel, so let's look at some of the key elements, to actually set the stage. So when we think about sustainability and the sustainability indicators for data centers and next generation core networks in the telecommunication industries, we have to ask ourselves, so how are those correlated and why is this so important? And when we think about, so approximately 19% of the overall energy consumption of a mobile network is in the core network. And as we are transitioning, from dedicated hardware in 2G, 3G, 4G to 5G, and then 6G ultimately, what we're working on, more and more of those applications are cloud native, and they're actually hosted in data centers. So therefore, looking at the overall sustainability operations in data centers is really critical and important to work towards and achieving like a net zero emission across the entire information communications and telecommunications industry and sector. And I think collectively, the industry, we are committed to a net zero operation by 2050 in various stages and various trajectories and various evolutions and various journeys, and that includes, scope 1, 2, and 3 of which scope 1 are all the direct emissions in their own operations. Scope 2 are all the emissions associated with the purchase of energy. The majority of the energy we buy, for our operations is electricity. And then the scope 3 emissions, by far a significant and extremely large portion of the overall emissions, is the entire supply chain, both on the upstream as well on the downstream, in terms of like the equipment, the services we acquire, we manufacture, we produce, and then provide, for the industry to actually use it and to install it and to operate it and to maintain it. And as we have that kind of shift to these more cloud native services, so therefore the need of sustainable data center practices is really becoming critical, and it's really vitally important that we all collectively work on this together. If we go to the next slide. So we talked and discussed a lot about KPIs, have the discussions, which ones are relevant, what we need to focus on. And one thing became really clear, and that starts with observability. So that means the creation of transparency, being able to measure the variety of kind of like the key indicators and the relationship to sustainability overall. And that gives users a choice, what to do, where to improve, where to spend resources, money, time, people, on this effect, in order to create like a better kind of outcome overall. And then ultimately that leads to a circular economy, where we have to look at the entire life cycle of an operation, from the design to the construction part, to the operate and maintenance, and ultimately, the decommissioning, and how can we repurpose, reuse, recycle these kind of equipments we use in our operation. So that's where I think it's really important. And when we look at the circular economy itself, so we have to look at the recycling aspect, and we look at different components where it's about energy efficiency, it's about the greenhouse gas emissions, but it's also about water consumption and water conservation, as well as like waste. How much waste are we creating that ends up in a landfill when we are positioning ourselves in this operation and acquiring all the products and services. And then ultimately the last one is like the impact on the land, so where we build the infrastructure, so what's the impact over there. So we take, the paper looks at a very holistic approach across all these 5 different elements, and then we discuss many KPIs in this paper. And so if you go to the next slide. So why is it so important to ensure that the data centers and consequently the core network of the telecommunication industry is actually sustainable, or is as sustainable as it can be, or putting resources into place in order to make it the most sustainable kind of journey and effort? It's because the data center industry is growing dramatically, and we have Nancy and Amanda here. We will talk in the panel about a little bit more about the growth itself. But it's been projected that between 2020 and 2030, the data center capacity as we have it right now from the enterprise, the co-location, and the hyperscalers is going to double. And it's also been projected that by 2050, compared to 2020, it's going to be 5x. So there's an enormous amount of more energy being consumed. Now, here's the interesting part. When we talk about doubling by 2030 or 5x by 2050, that's the amount of energy consumption. However, that is not a linear function to the compute and storage and network capacity. That is more like a hockey stick. So we're becoming more and more efficient, being able to compute more, to store more, and to transport more with less energy. And that journey needs to continue. So there are some projections that we believe that the overall greenhouse gas emissions, while we foresee a 5x by 2050, the greenhouse gas emissions are actually going to be stable. So therefore, efficiency, sustainability, these are all components we really have to work together. So if we go to the next slide. So the network functions, where we transition from dedicated hardware like in 2G, 3G, or 4G LTE, now to these cloud native implementations partially already happening in 5G, and certainly what's been foreseen and what's going to happen in 6G. So therefore, we're going to look at this, having these cloud native applications and implementations, and utilizing, AI networks in a native form to leverage, the new compute technologies, helping not only our own industry, the data center or the telecommunications industry, but many, many other industries, taking advantage of this kind of close proximity, the digitization of their processes, and utilizing AI technology, which is fueling a lot of data center growth right now, in order to help these industries, specifically when I think about manufacturing, the energy generation sector itself, as well as the transportation sector, to become more sustainable overall, to help us collectively. So we have a joint responsibility to make this together. And then, hopefully one day we will have a net zero phone call or a net zero kind of watching Netflix. All right, so that's part of the introduction from that regard. So what I would like to do now is to actually invite the panelists back onto the call, and we're going to get started there. So if Amanda, I see you coming online here. Nancy, hello. We can't see you yet, Amanda, but that's all right. Ah, there you are. You promised us earlier you won't touch anything anymore. Okay, and that's Colin. And then I think Michaela has not been able to join us yet. So perhaps when she does, we will weave her into the conversation. And if not, then, we have phenomenal guests here. I'm so excited, Amanda, Nancy, and Colin, that you're here. And that we can have this kind of conversation about this topic. And what I would like to do first is starting from a data.
Oh, Karsten.
Being hosted in data centers, as we just talked about. And so could you provide, Amanda and Nancy, provide us with some insights on the development efforts over what happened over maybe the last several years, what's happening today, and what you may think about what's going to happen moving forward in the next 3 to 5 years as it relates to data center construction itself. One of you. Amanda, I don't know, you're sitting right next to me there on the screen, so I'm starting with you.
Did you say me or Nancy? I was going to let Nancy start first.
Okay, well then Nancy it is.
Right now, obviously the development for data centers is all about, the 5G integration, the edge computing, that type of thing, connectivity, latency issues, being able to, have the ability to transmit, access, supply data, in the most efficient way possible. But I do think that in the future, we're really looking at more, more density and more a need for, the latency to get smaller and smaller, and to be able to have more ability to do things with automation, predictive things, cybersecurity concerns. There's lots coming on board. Some of it we can't even see, but there's lots coming on board now that's going to have an impact, not just in how we look at the infrastructure of how we're building these things out, but how we're future-proofing them as well, to keep up with the technology.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm sorry, I just totally forgot, Nancy. So in your role and responsibilities at Compass Data Center, so what do you do actually in your day-to-day job there? And I know I know you know each other, but maybe you can share that with us.
Sure thing. Yeah. So no, as Chief of Innovation for Compass, I get to have a lot of fun. I get to do all the fun things when it comes to the built environment and our whole life cycle of how we do business, because we are kind of a full soup to nuts, company that does our land prospecting. We buy, we own, we design, we build, we lease, and then we operate, in the end. So there's this huge, life cycle of events that happen. And so as an innovator, I get to touch a lot of the business. And what I love about the topic that we're talking about right now, how technology and what I call the fifth industrial revolution basically is merging with our business, is the way that we can have this impact, this huge opportunity, and how ESG kind of knits it all together. So it's been very gratifying to be able to be with a company and be in an industry where just doing things better that make a lot of sense, it makes a byproduct of having, a more sustainable, more efficient, more diverse, safer workforce and, and facilities that we get to operate in. And again, Carson, you and I talk about this all the time, and I'm from the built environment. So, being able to do things better and then having the business case that supports that and having these results is wonderful.
Yeah. Maybe I have a special question for you towards the end of the conversation. So hopefully I will remember we get back to you. It's about what are we going to do with the buildings when we no longer need them. So we'll think about it. Amanda, to you. So what's your role and responsibility at Stream Data Centers? And maybe you can give us an insight as well. And then back to the question I asked, so what happened in the last several years? How is Stream adapting to the new requirements, and where do you see the industry today and where do you see it in the next couple of years?
So great. So I'm the Senior Director of Sustainability for Stream. I'm fairly new to the company. I've been here a few months, but not new to the data center industry. So excited to be here. What I've seen over the last 4 years, I think, is a change in scale. We're moving from, leases, 4 years ago, we were excited about a 20 megawatt lease. Now we're kind of waiting for that 120 megawatt lease. So what that means is the scale of build and the scale of impact is getting much bigger. It's no longer a single building. It tends to be whole campuses and multiple campuses within the same community. So communities where we're building data centers is, I call them hotspots really, because all the developers start to follow these signals from hyperscalers and other customers that are looking for key markets to address some of the things that Nancy touched on in terms of, power availability, latency, fiber availability. So what happens is that all of us kind of flock to the same areas, build multiple data centers in the same areas. And what we see is that there's a bigger community impact because of that. And so in terms of where we're going and how we're maturing as an industry and thinking about, sustainability and ESG specifically, is not just how are we focused on the single building that we're building and the sustainability of that asset, but how does that look on a campus level? And how does that look in a community level of how we're all integrating together, how we can be better community members within these, because we are a big resource user in terms of power and water and space and land. And so I think our concept of sustainability and how we apply it to these projects is broadening in a really exciting way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, that's amazing. And before I go to you, Colin, just a quick follow-up question to both you, Nancy and Amanda. Are we building enough capacity right now, or would the industry or the market or whatever, could we build more if we could? So where are we right now? So are we building enough? Too much? No.
Yeah. I mean, there's consequences for not continuing to go at the pace we're going at on a global scale, on a national security scale, on a development for industry sector scale. All of these things, are important, and so not to keep pace is really not an option for us. So again, like the data center and digital infrastructure industry has this wonderful opportunity to help the built environment become a much better environment, right? Because there's not a single owner or client or agency I've ever built for that doesn't need data, store data, use data, access data, apply data, right? Digitizing the planet is part of this fifth industrial revolution that we're looking at, and we're the tip of the spear of that. We're the ones building out that infrastructure. So doing it in a more responsible way is a huge opportunity for us. Since nominally 50% of greenhouse gas emissions are from the built environment, and we are in this very large arena of having to build out this digital infrastructure, it gives us not just the opportunity but the obligation. It's almost incumbent upon this industry to really pivot and bring what I call kind of a stodgy old industry that I love in construction and into the future. And what it excites me is that we know how to do a lot of this. It's really just developing that business case around, making it happen so that we can still live and eat indoors and stay in business and stay competitive. And I always rely on the fact that, the mother of invention is necessity. And right now we see this necessity. So it's very promising.
You guys building data center, are you building enough, fast enough? Would you wish you could build more? We can't hear you, Amanda.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I would say the answer that you'd get from just about everyone to that question is we can't keep up right now. Like there's not enough. We need more and we need it quickly. And I think that it raises an interesting dilemma when we talk about sustainability, and something that just I've experienced both before this, before coming to the data center industry. I was in aviation, and it was very much the same challenge of when you're under pressure to build as quickly as we're required to build, and with the challenges that we're trying to address just with basic construction, it becomes harder to, I think long term and really think about sustainability on, when I talk long term, I'm talking 10, 15, 20 years usually. And when I talk to long term to some folks in different functions of our business, their long term is 2 to 3 years. So you're trying to, and even investors tend to look on a shorter 3 to 5 year time frame. And so, when we're talking about sustainability concepts, I think it does create, that pressure does create, yes, an opportunity for innovation, like Nancy said. I think scarcity kind of fosters innovation at a faster level. But I think also stress and pressure tends to shift focus to the here and now, and how do we solve these problems. And so it's taking that longer view and having a minute and having the processes in place with your teams to look out and say, okay, but what are the long-term consequences of this? And to your saying, these assets that we're building today, we're going to be operating hopefully well into the future, 25, 30, 40 years. And so how is that going to look down the road is really important. So I think, to answer your question, no, there's probably not enough built. No, I don't know that anyone will say, yes, we've got plenty. But I think it does create an interesting challenge of how do we continue to meet that demand in a sustainable way.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your insight. Colin, I want to shift to you. So we just talked about the data center growth and the importance of sustainability. So considering the, I want to talk about the core network of the telecommunication industry. So how does the evolution of 4G and 5G, and now we're developing towards 6G, how does the relationship impact between the telecommunication industry and the data center industry? How is that impacted? So maybe you can give us a perspective. Like, we see the data center growth, but what happened here in the telecommunication industry, leveraging and taking advantage of those data centers?
Okay. Yeah, so the evolution to 5G was certainly a big architectural transition for 3GPP and the core network in particular. For this first time, as you sort of mentioned in the initial slides, we defined a service-based architecture where network functions are defined to be cloud native, and that was all standardized. And that sort of replaced software that's running on bespoke hardware with specialized platform services. And by cloud native, it means that, point-to-point interfaces were replaced by basically services offered by those network functions. And the network functions were defined in a way so they could be stateless and sort of share common storage. So that helps, leverage the ability to be scalable and reliable and be managed through lifecycle management in a data center. So all of those things pointed towards, a different way of providing core network functions and resources. I would want to add that the need for data center resources are accelerating. One thing that wasn't mentioned is the proliferation of AI ML in all areas of the network. So all areas meaning the RAN core, the management plane, and that's happening even independent of standards right now. And it's also happening where 3GPP is defining things like there's a network data analytics function in the core network, which is supposed to provide analytics and do model training and things like that. So this whole AI ML sort of driven need for data center resources applies to telecom too, right? And the other big growth area is, with Cloud RAN. The RAN is still an area where at least some percentage of it is still on dedicated hardware. You need very, fast processing at the lower layers, and things like amplifiers aren't going to be, really managed in a cloud, but portions of it, the baseband processing, are amenable to cloud instantiation as virtualized functions, and that started, and it'll probably, I think we all expect it to accelerate. And that also helps with, the transition to having AI native functions in 6G. One difference between 6G and 5G is sort of AI is added as an afterthought in 5G and 6G. We're expecting, network functions to inherently incorporate AI in the network. So all of these
more AI, right? We need more AI,
right.
everywhere, right? So,
and more data center power to support that, right?
Very good. And Colin, I don't know why I'm not doing this right today, but what's your role and responsibility as Nokia?
Okay.
At the end, how's that?
Yeah, so I've been around a while. I did the whole Lucent, Alcatel-Lucent Nokia ride, and I've had roles in mobile network business unit and CTO, Bell Labs. Right now I support standards and industry engagement. And so on the standard side, I play a role in 3GPP and SA2 primarily, helping define both the AI/ML capabilities and also XRM, XR basically functionality. And on the industry engagement side, well, I guess this is part of it. And I help out with GSMA and support the North America sort of activities there, the ADIS TOPS Council I'm involved in, and things like that.
So you're a smart guy in the room, huh? So you're the smart guy in the room here.
I don't know. There are a lot of smart guys and gals in the room, so it's probably especially on the gal side. So.
That's right. There's smart gals in the room, and then there's one smart guy in the room. That's you. All right, very good. Well, thank you so much, Colin. Now, Michaela, I want to shift the focus to you, but maybe this time we'll start with your introduction. You're at Microsoft. Tell us what you do at Microsoft, and then we go from there.
Yeah, my pleasure. I joined Microsoft about 4 years ago, a little bit over 4 years, specifically for driving policies within Microsoft as well as external to Microsoft for 5G and telecommunications in general, because that was something new for Microsoft at that point. Since then, I sort of moved more into emerging technologies, so I don't cover only 5G, 6G, but also things like quantum and post-quantum encryption and cryptography and some AI, obviously, because everybody at Microsoft works with AI. So that's what I do.
Yeah. And could you maybe help us to understand, so how could the telecommunication industry take advantage of whatever sustainability efforts are happening in the data center industry? How could the telecommunication industry take advantage, or not take advantage of it, but leverage it, I should say, probably?
Absolutely. I think that's sort of intuitive that once you get on the data center with whatever workload, you will take advantage of the technology advancements that data center builders or hyperscalers have done for the past 10 years or 20 years, and actually more than that, just because we as hyperscalers need that type of sustainability as well as efficiency. And also because we are very clear from a Microsoft perspective, at least, on what we want from a sustainability perspective, and we have very stringent goals and quite goals and milestones that we have reached so far that we believe are quite unique. So whatever telco workloads we get, they will take advantage of the same hardware efficiencies as well as physical efficiency, physical sustainability efficiency, because we take that in consideration as well. So if you have a central office, it may be a central office of the past that has been built perhaps not necessarily with sustainability in mind. So that may be detrimental. If you need to build some sort of on-prem, that may also be less efficient than data centers. So overall, everything that we have done from a sustainability perspective will inherently benefit the telco world.
Oh, okay. And then I know maybe Colin, you have some additional remarks on this, because I also want to mention when we talk about data centers, and we were paying very close attention when we developed this paper, was we're not only talking about hyperscalers, right? So let's say our cloud services, whether it's Azure or AWS or others, a data center can be a cloud, it can be hyperscaler, but it could also be a co-location provider. It could be an enterprise data center, right? In the telecommunication industry, could also be edge deployments. So ultimately, where those IT assets live, it doesn't really differentiate between a hyperscaler, an enterprise, or perhaps an edge application. Sustainability is critical, important. So, Colin, do you see that there's differences between those different layers of where the data centers or where these services are running, or some services may run on the edge and others may run in the cloud? I don't know. So, how do you see that?
Yeah, certainly and I'll put on my 3GPP hat again. There is some importance on where things run, especially if you're trying to attain certain KPIs like low latency, for example, or you have industrial applications that are running, in an enterprise, and hence there are security concerns and things like that. There's also sort of, just to add to what was said earlier, sort of two worlds here, right? There's the world of the mobile network operator and 3GPP, where they defined sustainability KPIs just in general, and some of those are for virtualized network functions that appear as workloads in data centers, and those KPIs are very focused on energy efficiency and energy consumption, without regard very much to the particulars of that, like where the energy is coming from, and other aspects like water usage and land usage and other things that are involved in sustainability. So I think where there is a very good sort of synergy here is the sort of merging of those two, where the sustainability KPIs that mobile network operators, because they naturally come from 3GPP, tend to look at or are concerned about, get broadened to incorporate some of the additional things that can be factored in with data center KPIs. And the evolution of data center KPIs to take into account some of those other factors.
Yeah, I appreciate this perspective. Thank you so much. Amanda and Nancy, so we said earlier that we don't seem to be able to build it fast enough, right? Now let's assume we somehow solve this challenge, right? Building enough capacity for the demand that's there right now. In the current design, and when I think about the design, the construction as well is a huge component of that, and then the operation, maintenance, and decommissioning, how does sustainability from a corporate's perspective, how does this, how important is this, and what kind of initiatives are you taken on in order to make those new IT capacities more sustainable? Can you shed some light on this, Nancy?
Yeah, no, sure thing, Carsten. It's super important to us, and I think it's important for the audience to know that, there's so many things right now that are benefiting the, the practice of really good ESG, ways to do business, and that it could be, from discounted funds to tax abatements to like really good business cases around that. But in addition to that, I just want to point out that, typically when we focus on, getting our intensity values lower, which is basically the greenhouse gas emissions or the carbon footprint we have every year, when we focus on getting those lower and lower, we end up becoming more competitive, more efficient, safer, all these other things, right? All these other benefits come with it. So we definitely focus on areas of impact, Carsten, and those areas of impact are typically design decisions, product selections, means and methods, and use of technology. Sometimes they kind of overlap, but for the most part, those are areas of impact. We have problem statements that we go after. We tuck a lot of things underneath those problem statements. And every year we measure where we are with our embodied carbon, our scopes 1, 2, and 3, including downstream. But the scope 3 is the most challenging, but we're very highly focused on what that looks like from a snapshot year to year, and are we improving on that, right? So when we look at, the ways that we can take our life cycle analysis and we can look at our footprint and we can make our intensity values less as we develop and grow and our absolute values grow, we want our intensity values to go down. And there's tons and tons of business reasons for that as well.
Yeah. So Amanda, Nancy just mentioned sustainability is a competitive advantage. So how do you incorporate sustainability, and what kind of resources are you allocating to that? And how important is it? Equally important to Stream as it is for Compass?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought that, as I've been working in this, I think sustainability, quite frankly, across data center developers is becoming less of a competitive advantage and more of a core business function. It's kind of transitioning. It's really about managing risk. It's no longer enough I don't think it's, I certainly think the level of innovation and how you apply sustainability is going to be a differentiator. But having these programs in place is table stakes. If you're not doing it, you're not going to get the financing. You're not going to get the leases. There's so many pressures right now on our industry. So, I think that shifts to now how you do it. And that's where I think you can really start to see the business benefits that Nancy is speaking of. If you're trying to you have companies that are trying to, really say, oh, we're the most sustainable company on the planet, but they don't really have a holistic integrated approach to sustainability. It's very kind of eco-efficiency focused. Oh, it's because we're so energy efficient. It's like, you kind of got to change it in order to see really the full business value of these programs. They need to be integrated into all aspects of your business. So not just your design and construction, but how you're making decisions about what land you buy in the first place, how you make decisions about financing and what financing you go after, how you make decisions about hiring and promoting team members within your organization. If you're not really integrating this into all aspects, you will see some business benefit from sustainability, but you will not see the maximum benefit and see the things that really create that competitive advantage.
I agree.
So to that point, I mean, we're looking, I think across the industry, you start to look at ESG reports. I just messaged Nancy the other day about how much I liked their ESG report. Stream is very much the same. We want to make sure that we're measuring the right metrics. We're doing it year over year. We're being transparent and we're tracking progress. And I think with Stream, our approach is really about how do we be authentic and lead the industry through sharing lessons learned to saying, hey, what works and what doesn't, and how, because we're all trying to solve the same problems. And I think sustainability is one of those topic areas that really lends itself to collaboration because there's, we're all kind of tackling the same issues in very similar ways. And so how do we share those lessons learned and kind of help support each other to move further faster? But the metrics are, yeah.
I mean, there's enough for everybody, right, Amanda? So we need to join forces. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Very good. Hey, Mika, thank you so much, Amanda, for that insight. Michaela, Amanda was just talking about the metrics, right? And this white paper we published, it's about KPIs, right? Key performance indicators as it relates to sustainability. And I know that, and you work for Microsoft, so big data center operator and provider. So can you a little bit maybe talk about the KPIs that we still have PUE, right? Power utilization effectiveness, and then there's WE, water utilization effectiveness, and there's many others. So can you probably help us to understand where on this sustainability journey is Microsoft? Which KPIs are you actually looking for your own operations, but then, for example, if Compass and Stream build capacity, which then maybe Microsoft is leasing, what are you looking for in others, that's relevant to your operation? Can you give us a bit of a perspective of those different KPIs, what's important?
Sure. First of all, let me preface that I am not a data center expert. Sure. Obviously, I read a lot about what we are doing, and I'm abreast with, the innovation that we are bringing forward, as well as with our reports, yearly reports that we provide. And clearly, like data center. From a data center perspective, we are utilizing, as you said, the KPIs on the power as well as water, energy and water. Overall, Microsoft is looking at 4 major categories, basically carbon, water, waste, and ecosystem. So those are the buckets, if you wish, that we report on year over year. And within each of these categories, we have a baseline. We have set up a baseline 2020 because we have some objectives. Some objectives we went back a little bit. Some objectives we are fully on our timeline to get to them. So we will get to zero waste by 2030. We will get to renewable, sources of water or reusage of water by 2030 as well, 100%. Some of the things that we have seen growing, it's scope 3 emissions, for instance. And we are very transparent, exactly what Amanda and Nancy were talking about. We want to make sure that whatever we report, it's clearly defined, as well as it's relative to a baseline. Having said that, I don't think there are many other KPIs than the one that we mentioned that all data centers are reporting. So we don't have, as data centers, I don't think there is a set of KPIs that we are all, working from. Which, it's just, maybe it's just the nature of our business, or maybe we will get there. I think, though, the most important piece is to make sure that we define those, because in the end, whether or not are the same standards, as long as we understand the same things from each of them and we can bring them to the right, substance, we will be okay, because it is in our interest to be sustainable. There is no question about that. I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried.
I understand, and I have a follow-up question specifically to those KPIs. And but before we go there, I just want to have another perspective from Colin about when we talk about core network and data center. We talk about infrastructure, right? So that's the physical layer, so to speak. Where then in which the IT equipment, the network, the storage stuff, resides in, on which then applications and services are being programmed and software and so forth. They run on those IT equipment and hardware, which then ultimately they reside in a data center. So Colin, when we look at this on these 3 different layers, and we talked about this in the paper, right? Of course, it's really important that the core infrastructure, the core network, the data centers are sustainable as they can be, and moving towards a net zero waste, and what Michaela just mentioned, and other elements. But how important are the IT equipment and the applications itself? Because a developer can write a service with millions of lines of code and provide a certain service, and it requires a certain amount of IT resources, which then requires a certain amount of IT infrastructure. But maybe you can code more efficiently. I mean, is this something the industry is looking at in terms of 5G, 6G, and what are you guys doing at Nokia? So
yeah, so certainly at the application layer, there are metrics, as I mentioned before. So you may have let's say a network slice that's supporting massive IoT, and resources, network functions are then allocated in order to support, let's say, that particular application. And then there are metrics defined to define, say, well, the energy consumption of the sustainability metrics is something that would be based on the compute resources of those virtual network functions. In other words, the amount that they consume, which is actually difficult to estimate, and is a little bit of perhaps a weak spot in determining the sustainability. But energy consumption is in everything. Energy efficiency counts too. So then you end up with efficiency metrics like the number of massive IoT users that I can support using a given virtualized network function that's consuming a given amount of energy. So it makes a difference whether that energy consumed, supports a large number of users versus fewer users when you're talking about sustainability. It's not just what you consume, it's what you get for what you consume. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, that's all fairly focused on just energy usage and energy consumption. What's missing there is the more detailed sort of metrics that determine where does that energy come from. Is it actually, from a coal fire plant, or is it from a sustainable energy plant? What about other things? Where's cooling? What is the PUE of that data center and things like that, which are not really taken into account when you're looking at this sort of, and at a, purely, let's say, a software application layer, which is the tendency currently, when, folks who are involved in developing networks think of what is their network doing. So I think there's a lot of value, and what needs to happen to make things more sustainable is to look at more of an end-to-end view, where you look not just at energy efficiency or energy consumption, but some of these other factors, and can make that a consideration. This actually, I think, can contribute to business opportunities. If this can be done well, mobile network operators can offer sustainability as a service to subscribers. You can sign up with your operator to say, you know what, I care about my carbon footprint. My operator is operating a sustainable service, versus something that might be less sustainable, and it can actually be something that can be monetized, or alternatively offered as a competitive differentiator. That's, well, one operator is providing something more sustainable than another operator, and therefore, it can become a competitive advantage for them. So there are opportunities there. Yeah.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you so much. And you just mentioned about, where's the energy coming from, right? So Amanda, Nancy, maybe Michaela, when you operate or when you build a data center and you connect yourself to the utility company to get the power, do you consider how is this electron coming from the utility company? Where has this been generated? How has it been generated? Is it green? Is it in France? The majority is nuclear. In Virginia, there's still a lot of coal. In California, there's a lot of renewables. So do you consider this, or do you measure this? Do you report on it?
We have to these days. I mean, you really have to pay attention to that for a lot of reasons. Even if we do have, leases that are passed through like triple net or modified triple net, it still matters to us whether or not we can offset, the greenhouse gas emissions from the source of the power. We also, really focus on transmission and getting the transmission as close as possible, because there's a lot of loss, in that. And so we have no problems, building our own substations as sustainably as we can to bring that transmission closer to our large campuses. And we're really focused on looking at, being able to help out these communities, like Amanda had pointed out earlier, by looking at the peak hours and being able to provide, power where needed in a sustainable way. And I think our competitors are doing the same thing, because that's one of those things that is becoming like the first step, towards some of the solutions of, having areas where the power is tapped. And and consumption matters so much, whether it's water, power, fuel, you name it. I mean, consumption matters. I also think, we are one of the first data center providers that uses HVO fuel, for our backup generators, because it was something we could do now and today. And even if it costs more money, it's something that we think makes a big difference from a noxious gas standpoint. So, if you could do something now and it makes a difference, I think you should do something. And I always like to say, Karsten, in the end, it's never going to be just this or that. It's going to be this and that. It's going to be everything, right? So we have to look at all of these things very holistically, and know that there's not just one solution.
Sure, no, I understood. Yeah, Amanda, Michaela, where are you taking the energy from?
Go ahead, Michaela, if you.
Well, I just want to say that we tend to have the renewable energy, basically. So we are trying to figure out how to use renewable energy and we do that using different means, whether we contract or we, depending on where in the world we are, it's absolutely top of mind on where the energy is coming from, what form of energy are we using, and how we do give back, for instance, energy. So, for instance, some of the heat produced, I believe that it's in Copenhagen in the data centers, we are using it actually, or maybe Oslo, to heat some of the neighborhoods, right? So there is always this thought that we need to make sure we decrease the carbon footprint, obviously, and reuse everything that we can for the better of the environment around us.
So the reuse of the heat. So absolutely, yeah. So
that's an example, yes.
Yeah, sure. Instead of just blowing it up in the atmosphere, let's repurpose it, right? So, and I think Europe is way more advanced in integrating that more efficiently, and there's regulations around it to actually facilitate and support this. I think we have to in the United States, we have to, in this regard, we have to do a little catch up. So, by the way, I want to say on the audience, so thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, please use the question tab in the panel, so you can type in any questions you have. And if we have time, we will get to it. And if not, we will be able to answer it afterwards. Right? All right. And look, and I also know we're coming close to the end here. And so I just want to get a bit of a perspective from all of you in terms of like, where do you see where's the future? I mean, you know, sometimes in the data center industry right now, we're talking about SMRs, nuclear technology, that's green energy. We can produce it on site in massive amounts, you know, but then there's other drawbacks associated with that. So where do you see the industry in 3 to 5 years from now? And I'm asking all of you actually collectively. So starting with you, Amanda.
Pressure, no pressure.
Pressure, no pressure.
Well, I can, you know, my prediction is our industry, we've come a long way already, just in the short time that I've been part of this industry, you know, coming on 5 years. I think there's going to be continued evolution and, you know, identification of efficiencies within our own system, both in terms of computing density, and, you know, how we're using energy, where we're getting it from. But I think also broadening our definition of impact and not just focusing too narrowly on, is it net zero carbon, but let's look more broadly at what this means across all of those metrics that you spoke of earlier of energy, water, fuel, downstream emissions, you know, really looking at this as an ecosystem and how we can be a better partner of that ecosystem and community more broadly, you know, however we want to define that, both for our internal workforce, as well as the communities that we're operating in, as well as the kind of global community that this industry is driving. So I think we'll continue just to see an evolution of that over the next several years, and even more innovation. I mean, the people in this industry are top notch, smart people. There's lots of money in this industry to drive this innovation. So it's a really exciting time to be part of.
So money is not an issue, huh?
I didn't say that.
very, very good. I'm going to bring this to our management at Schneider Electric. Like, yeah, let's charge more. Thank you, Amanda. Nancy, where other than, you know, you might be in Portugal at that time, but where do you see the industry in 3 to 5 years from now?
Well, I mean, I'm a glasses half full kind of person. I see this industry, like I said, taking the built environment into the future. But one of the things I want to stress is, you know, the human capital is one of the most valuable things we have in our industry, and the built environment and the tech world is not as diverse as it needs to be. And you know, to be more innovative, we need more diversity of thought, experience, culture, background, gender, you name it. And I do see the industry moving in that direction as one of those necessities, right? The necessity of invention again. So and I'm excited about that. I think that's going to help us a lot because, again, there's not going to be any one answer. There's going to be multiple answers, and we have to look at this holistically, like Amanda said. It's not just one problem. It's a multitude of challenges, basically, that we have to be able to overcome. Time matters, you know, whether or not you've got something that's going to last 3 times as long, and the abundancy of materials matter. But when you look at the human capital factor, and how we're putting work in place and how we operate and maintain these facilities, I think that is going to be something that is going to get a lot of focus. And in the future, I think 5 years from now, what we've been talking about, we'll start to see action behind that. And I really do hope that the industry becomes more diverse because it's a fabulous industry. It's a very noble industry, and it's going to help close the digital divide in and around the globe and provide all kinds of great opportunities. And I would love for people to come into the industry and enjoy it as much as I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nancy. Thanks for that perspective. Colin, final words from you?
Yeah, I think we've already come quite a long way. I think in 4G, beginning of 5G, sustainability was important, but it wasn't in the top 5, right? So people were very much focused on other aspects of what, you know, the application will bring, and not necessarily energy consumption and energy efficiency. And that's a huge sea change to the point where one of the defining factors in 6G will be its improvement in sustainability and how it can better use energy and reduce energy consumption and basically make sure telecom remains a good citizen. I think we're sort of at a very exciting time where there's a sort of evolution in the ICT industry where there needs to be more engagement between sort of the application layer, those 3 layers that we mentioned in the white paper, so that there is, they're not working independent of each other, but are working together with each other. And the future, I think, holds a lot of promise. There's a lot to mine out of that as far as creating really energy efficient and dynamic networks that take sustainability into account in a serious way.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Colin. I'm looking forward to that. Michaela, 30 seconds. Final thoughts from you.
30 seconds. So I'm, a half glass full type of person. I think we are doing things that we would not have imagined few years, going few years from now. I think we are at the moment that we can start at least imagining creating new materials to bring, for carbon removal, to create materials that are much more efficient when building the data centers, to whatever, to create new batteries, to create new cooling systems. So I think we are at the precipice that we can see a lot of good coming from all the technologies that we bring, including data centers, telecom, AI. All this coming together will create a world that I see it's going to be better, and I'm hopeful.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate Amanda, Nancy, Michaela, and Colin for being here and the leadership at 6G and NextG Alliance. So it's amazing. Download the paper, read the paper, take action. We can't wait for somebody else to fix it and to help us. So we all have to collectively work together. And Michael Jackson in one of his songs is like, start with the man in the mirror, right? So that's with us, right? So we all collectively have to work together. So with that, I would like thank you so much for being on the panel. And the questions from the audience, we will get to it afterwards. We'll send it to you if we have your contact information. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Bhushan for final takeaway and final thoughts here.
Great. Thank you all so much again. It was such an amazing webinar. I felt like we could have gone for 2 hours, but time's short, so let me be quick. I think really great insights from all of you. I'm really happy to see how we're thinking about integrating sustainability across our ecosystem, because if we have to reach net zero as an industry, all of us have to contribute and coordinate across our particular sections of the telco ecosystem. So some key takeaways from my point of view from the white paper, reducing energy consumption and improving efficiency is key. That's how you tackle the operational greenhouse gas emissions for core and for data centers. But sustainability is beyond energy consumption. It's not just energy and emissions, is, as we talked about, water, land use, circular economy, embodied emissions of products and hardware. So it's a much bigger issue. And I think in the white paper, we provide some KPIs that will really help you measure the performance on those sustainability metrics. So really great to again have you all. I think my next slide, Ali, if you could go to the next slide, really has a link. So if folks want to download the webinar, please do. The GreenG working group is actively working to position North American leadership in sustainability in telco. So if you would like to join us and be involved in our programming, please reach out to any one of us and we will get you plugged in. Thank you again so much and have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.